Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Preparis. Not joining me is Brenna Calvert, but I do have another guest on the line, which we'll get to in 1 minute. This episode is brought to you by Merrill. If you haven't heard, I will be racing World's Toughest Mudder in less than a week at this point as Team Merrill with Wesley Kerr. Merrill has some great products. I got to try out a couple different pairs of their shoes. So they have the All-Out Crush, which is the Tough Mudder branded one. A little more cushioning, a little aggressive trail lugs on the bottom, so I like that one. I've been using that one a lot for training. I also got to try out their Vapor Glove, which is like their bare minimalist shoe. So if you like Vibram 5 fingers without your toes looking all weird, you can check out the Vapor Glove. If you want a little more cushioning, Trail Glove, which is my personal favorite. Not a whole lot of support there, but just a little bit, and Zero Drop. And then Bare Access Flex is their other one. A little more cushioning than the Trail Glove, but not quite as much cushioning as the All Out Crush. I will write a review on them on Mud Run Guide at some point, so keep an eye out for that. Also want to give a shout out to their Micro Light Puffer jacket. It's like the softest jacket in the world, and it is awesome. So if you're looking to pick up a new jacket for winter, it's pretty light, pretty compact, but it's warm, and it's, like I said, it's like the softest thing in the world. Anyway, let's get to the actual show. So joining me is Miles Keller. Miles.
Yeah. What's up, Evan?
Yeah.
Hey, man, thanks for having me back on.
No problem.
Evan, some people might be wondering, why in the world is he having Miles Keller back on? I've already been on the show several times. And let me tell everyone out there, I'm having a baby boy in February, and I'm naming him after Mr. Preparis here. So if you, too, want to name your child after Evan, you can get on the show as well.
Yes, I will. I will put you on the show if you're naming your child after me. That's absolutely true.
No, I went around and I asked. I've been looking around for names, and there's not a lot of unique boys' names, but I've never known an Evan I don't like. Every Evan I've ever known has been like a rock solid guy. Just good all the way around, rock solid guy. And that's what everyone else has said when I asked them about the name. So if anyone out there has came across an Evan they don't like or they do like a lot, I would love to hear about it. I also co-host the Link Endurance podcast, so you can hit me up there. Make sure you check our episodes out there, but hit me up and let me know, because I think Evan Preparis, this gentleman right here, on the podcast, Inside OCR, life as a father, husband, all that stuff, is an amazing individual, as you all probably know because you listen to this podcast. But it's a good name.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Miles. I feel like I'm supposed to give you the introduction as the guest, but that was still nice.
My introduction is simply Schmuck. It's just Miles the Schmuck Keller. He's meh.
So me and Miles always have good banter. Always love talking about OCR. So there was some recent news that broke. We're actually recording this slightly before the news actually comes out. So by the time this is actually published, some of you may actually have a tiny bit more information than we do. But on Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, I believe, they announced the location for the OCR World Championships and U.S. Championships, which has a slight twist to it. So, Miles, you want to fill us in on the OCR World Championships location?
Well, first, let me correct that last statement. It's no longer going to be the U.S. OCR Championships, but the North American OCR Championships instead of the U.S. OCR Championships. It will be taking place in Vermont. And I asked them, said, hey, does that mean, I'm assuming that means Canada is included as well. And sure enough, it is. So unlike this year, when people didn't have to worry about Ryan Atkins and Lindsey Webster taking all the medals and money, they do have to worry about that again in 2018, because they will be there and they will be as awesome as they always are.
Yeah. So, well, since we're already on the topic, let's just dive right into the North American one, and then we'll circle back around to the world. But while I understand that move. It's clearly a good business move, right? Because you're doubling the number of athletes that can come, essentially.
See,
I kind of liked the U.S. one. All right, I'll just be upfront, right? Like, the Canadians regularly kick my ass, regardless of the distance. 8 hours, 24 hours, short course, I lose to Canadians fairly often. So I kind of liked losing to just Americans for once. It was a nice change.
Dude, I'm with you. They beat all of us. They beat all of us constantly. And they're such great people. You can't help but hug them afterwards and say, hey, good job for kicking the crap out of me, man. You're incredible.
Yeah, super nice. I mean, Ryan, Lindsay, Allison Ty, Austin Azar, all those. I mean, just...
Oh, yeah. Josh Stride, Mikhail Geronimo. It goes on and on and on. But I'm super excited to talk about this aspect with you. I don't really get a chance to talk about this part on our show, and you don't hear about it on some of the other podcasts, but the side of it about the monetization. These are businesses, and they have to turn a profit to stay in business so we can continue to do these races. A lot of people don't realize that most races have a hard time turning a profit because of the great amount of overhead. There's so much more that goes on to it on the backside that we don't realize, that it makes it hard for some places to turn a profit. I would actually like some future time to have somebody like David Main Prize or someone else who is a CEO of a race series and ask, hey, what are all these other charges and everything that we don't understand about that play into the profitability, and so you can continue to run this business, right?
Yeah, they're deceivingly expensive. I know on race day you're like, oh, well, there's like 1,000 people and everyone's paying, $50 to $100. Like, you got to be making a killing here, but it costs a lot of money. Like you said, it costs a lot of money on the backside. I happen to know some of the numbers for some of the companies. Actually, I know a little bit about Conquer the Gauntlet. I'm not going to spread their business all over the, public here, but it's a lot more than I would have thought goes into the backside, the initial cost.
Yeah, and USOCRC had a hard time this year. It wasn't. I'm so glad it was in Texas the first year, and that makes it easier. There's a large group of us here in the Texas OCR scene, so that was wonderful. It was close by home, but this is also right after the flooding in Houston. So, for instance, Adrian Bijanata with OCR World Championships had 65 volunteers, I believe, were not able to make it. They had to cancel last minute. And those were just the volunteers. This isn't to mention all the people that wanted to initially come that now couldn't come because flights were all canceled. It's hard getting in and out of certain sections of Texas. There was a major fuel shortage. Even me and the other co-host, host the other Link Endurance podcast with Mo, we called each other and was like, hey man, do you think we can make it back? You think we'll have fuel? You think we'll be able to find fuel on the way back? And we live here in Texas, and we were sweating it. So I heard that from a lot of other people. And, Adrian already brought all the other race brands. All the other race brands had brought their obstacles. They're set up. They're fully invested. They spent tons of money. And now you're going to have a hard time turning a profit of that. So I feel like Texas didn't get a fair shot due to those circumstances. And so there was fewer people there, right? Is that how it seemed to you, Evan? Yeah,
from what I'm tracking, I think they still turned a profit. That being said, I think they rely OCR World Championships and USOCRC, basically all, Adrian's brands rely a lot on volunteers, and Adrian said that before, so that's not really groundbreaking news. But I think a lot of people put a lot of extra time in there with little compensation on their side. So.
Oh yeah, not to mention there's people still setting up the course up until race day, all throughout the night. Having to move things and fix things and problem solve because of all the different. That's just the business of obstacle course racing, right? Yeah. There's all kinds of these different variables, and little things can go wrong. And they do such a good job of making sure they put the safety first of a lot of people. And not to mention hard racing out there out in the middle of nowhere. The Hawaii Ranch is in Mountain Home, Texas, which is 30 minutes down a farm road, and there's zero internet connection.
Yeah, that was out in the middle of nowhere. And like you said, the gas shortage, it was like Mad Max out there, right? Like, I mean, I was driving from gas station to gas station, and it was like, oh, everything is empty. Everything's empty. Everything's empty. Like, I saw one gas station, and that's where I filled up at, basically in the entire town on my way out there. So
yeah, no, that's about right. I mean, it was still a great race. I thought it was interesting though, even though it was what we in Texas consider hill country. There's an area right outside of Austin, in that area near Mountain Home is called Hill Country, and it's very, very hilly. Which you look at South and North Texas is very, very flat. And I felt like that race was actually very, very flat. There wasn't as many hills as I was expecting for what we call hill country. But I also think that made the 3K course on Saturday interesting because it was, the 3K is supposed to be fast. And boy, was it fast and furious. It let all the pros go out full bore. No one was slacking. Everyone was going balls to the wall. And I think it made that much more interesting. Maybe it threw some people for a loop because they were expecting the hills, right?
Yeah. I mean, I liked the fact that it was not hilly. I think, too often in OCR we get caught up. Everything has to be bigger and harder, and everything has to be run on a mountain, and that's. I think it's awesome to have mountain courses mixed in there. I think it's also awesome to have flat courses, and just like I like courses with super hard obstacles like Conquer the Gauntlet, I also think there's room for brands like Warrior Dash where it's almost impossible to fail something. So I like the variation.
No, I'm right along with you. So, well, let's talk about the location now for the North American OCR championships will be in Vermont. So a lot of people probably listen to this show are familiar with Vermont because you have a lot of the Spartan races that happen there in Vermont, and that's some tough terrain. Not only is it tough terrain, now we don't know the date yet of when exactly. I'm going to look it up and see if I got updated info on it. Depending on the time of year, it could be freezing cold in Vermont. Have you raced up there? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think I want to say it's in August, isn't it? Didn't they put out the date before? They put out like a reserve the date on beforehand? We probably should have looked this up beforehand.
I'm looking.
So anyway,
right now.
While you're looking that up, so I have raced in Vermont before. I have not raced Killington, although I do. That is kind of one of my bucket list races, just because, pretty big mountain, and kind of like home to Spartan. And they did the championship there for a couple of years, so I do want to do Killington at some point. But I have raced Shell Hell, the permanent obstacle course facility up there, and I've raced it in late July, and I've raced it in early August. And the first time I raced it in early August, the weather was hot during the day, and it was kind of cooled at night, but nothing too cold. And when I raced it at the end of July, this past a couple months ago, it was actually really cold. Like, it dropped down to like 50s in the middle of the night.
Wow.
So I was out there running by myself, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, it's like late July. I thought it was going to be like 70 at night. But you won't have to worry about going overnight, so it'll be warm, I think, is the bottom line. Did you find the date?
No, not yet. I just messaged Adrian, see if I can get an updated date. I should have figured that out before we started. But either way, that's a very mountainous region, right? I haven't spent any time in Vermont, but from what I can tell, there'll definitely be some mountains involved.
Yeah, I think that's guaranteed.
Okay. That's interesting. And then, you know what? Because they're calling it the North American OCR Championships, it's a little closer for the Canadians. It's actually a fantastic spot because it's kind of in the middle between America and Canada, right?
Yeah. Okay, here, I found it. It says save the date, August 10th to the 12th, 2018, for United States Obstacle Course Racing Championship, which is going to be
nice.
North America. Right.
That's kind of like summertime.
Yeah. It's
That's
right
not too
smack
bad.
Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be hot, if anything. Definitely going to be a mountain course. Again, just speculating here, but I would almost guarantee, I can guarantee it's not going to be at Shale Hill. It's just they don't have the volume of the number of lanes for that course, right? Like, you can't put that many people through that course. Some of their obstacles are 1 or 2 lanes wide, and as we saw at the World Championship this year, the rig was like 16 lanes or something insane, right?
Well, they historically, the OCR World Championship Series has sent out waves in set, say 15, 30-second increments. Sometimes I could be wrong. Maybe it was 2-minute increments. I've raced in it. I don't know why I can't remember. But either way, like, that does kind of make it so that you don't need as many lanes, and they could always kind of expand those existing lanes. And they have historically used, tried to use permanent courses like they did this year at the YO Ranch for the U.S. OCR championships. They use Green Beret challenges, permanent course there at the YO Ranch.
Yeah, having been to Shale Hill, I can tell you it's just the way the course is set up. It's just not gonna. You can't support that many people.
Not gonna happen. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
It's just not gonna happen. I mean,
yeah, you ran that course quite a few times actually. That was part of your OCR Across America, if I remember correctly.
Yep, that's correct. So.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, I wish them the best with that.
I've run it in June too. Yep. Yeah, so I guess we'll find out more about North America OCR championships. But again, I think if you've been to the U.S., if you've been to the World One, that's obviously something you want to mark on your calendar right now, right? August 10th through the 12th.
I'm so jealous, man. I'm jealous. I'm blessed in one way, and then jealous in another way. I'm blessed in the way that I'm having a little baby boy in February, but I will definitely not be able to race in August. The wife has put the old kibosh on me traveling for races.
Ah, yes.
It's going to be very hard getting out and get to as many local races as I can next year. But unfortunately, I'm going to end up having to miss that. It sucks because those races are special.
Yeah. It's we ended up traveling with my little one a lot fairly soon after she was born, but it definitely complicates things. The only good thing is you can bring them on the flight, and that's you don't have to pay for an extra ticket. So
before 2 years old, they get to fly for free. 2 years old, but anything after that, it is a full price ticket.
Yep.
And it gets expensive, buddy. And then you got to get their passport. So actually, speaking of passports, this next year will be a good one. I hope everyone has a passport, because here's the breaking news on the OCR World Championships. It is no longer going to be in America. It's going to happen in the UK. How about that? How does that hit you, Evan?
I mean, that's exciting. I think it's awesome. Our European friends have been traveling over to, Western Hemisphere for the last 4 years, and I think it's great that we're having it in the Eastern Hemisphere for once, and they can, some of them can sleep in their beds at night, some of them can take essentially local flights. They don't have to deal with the huge time zone changes. And I think it's great. It forces some of Americans to go out and see the other side of the world. So
that's the best way to grow, right? Too many people don't leave their county, don't leave their state, never leave the country. And while I understand what it's like for certain people to just never leave their area because that's their comfort zone, you can never grow, man. Once you get to see different countries and peoples and cultures, you can see the world through a different perspective, and it'll change the way you look at everything. And it's so wonderful to be able to see the world through other people's eyes, and you'll pick things up like, maybe I can do that better if I didn't do that. And it applies to OCR as well. I remember, I believe OCR World Championships in 2015 when it was in Ohio at King's Domain. Bracken Crocker pointing out to me, he goes, look at that. You see how the South Africans like to use they'll put their hands on their knees when they power hike up the hills. It's like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. That's a good point. I could see why that would help up these extremely steep inclines. And if you didn't know the South Africans before they were in Ohio, you would have never known something like that. It's cool little things you'll find in different cultures. And it just broadens your horizons, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Not sure if I'm not sure. Well, let's before we go there. Do you think with it going to the UK, do you think the competition will be higher or lower than it was in the US?
Well, I'd say some of the best from the OCR scene in Europe. I was about to say UK in Europe because I want to include athletes like Nicolaj Dam, right, from Denmark. You'll see from Sweden Oh my gosh, Kristen. I'm having a brain fart. One of the best women over there will podium over at OCR World Championships over here. I think you're seeing some of the best already from the Europe traveling over to America. But like John Hancock and them, you'll see them. And of course, Albin is always there. But you'll definitely see some more. I'm super interested to see how this works financially for OCR World Championships. Keep in mind, they're going to have to get, or they will most likely have obstacles from the other races in Europe bring their obstacles over. Just like here in America, we have all the different races from Indian Mud Run and Conquer the Gauntlet and Terrain and Savage Race. All these people, they bring their obstacles over, and these obstacles are what makes the best of OCR World Championships, right? It's the best representation of what a World Championships should be for obstacle course racing. Now, it comes to the point you talk about, can you turn a profit like that? Or are American races going to bring their obstacles over there? And I would imagine that to be extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Unless they just all outright build them over there.
Yeah.
What
I think's going to be cool about this, I imagine that they're not going to ship a lot of the obstacles, if any. Maybe they'll bring some of the obstacles over, but I think it'll be a completely new crop of obstacles and stuff we have not seen before as Americans, right? So you'll get like you said, you get all those local European, Eastern Hemisphere race brands bringing their obstacles in, and it'll be a very different look from the last 4 years. That's what I'm kind of predicting.
Yeah, when we talk about race series from the European scene, just as some of the American listeners here can kind of get an idea of the different race series in Europe. Let's talk them. We got the Jeep Series Warrior. The Jeep Warrior Series wouldn't count. That's in Africa. We don't really see a lot of that, but we do see the Viking Series. We see Toughest Elite. There are some Spartan races over there, but Spartan historically hasn't shown up to the series.
Right.
What other race series can you think of? For me, Toughest Elite stands out.
Oh
it's
yeah,
probably
absolutely.
my favorite to watch across the pond.
Yep. And I think you might see some of the smaller race companies, that they're just not on our radar from that side of the world show up. Like I'm sure most people have never heard of Conquer the Gauntlet when they first came to OCR World Championships, right? Even a lot of the U.S. athletes hadn't heard of it until probably a couple of years ago.
You would say that, Evan, but did you watch the European OCR Championships?
I did not. No, I did not. I caught I think I caught the highlight reel. I didn't catch the full thing.
So you and me are huge fans. You obviously you're on the pro team, but you and me are huge fans of Conquer the Gauntlet. It's our favorite series, and I always thought that our obstacles at Conquer the Gauntlet are unique. We're very, very unique, right? But when I watched the European OCR Championships, you wouldn't believe this, but they had hammer time.
That's right. I remember seeing that.
They had stairway. And I want to say, did they have a pegboard? Darn it, I can't remember now. It
wasn't a pegboard, but it was a third one, because I remember it was 3 different CTG-specific obstacles, and I think several of them were painted black and green, which I thought was the most bizarre part. Right? Choose a different paint scheme, guys.
Dude, it's a great thing that OCR is so loving. Had this been any other industry, when someone else, comes upon someone else's copies, someone else's IP like that, there would be litigation involved, right? This is a very litigious matter, but because OCR is so welcoming and supporting of that, there's obviously none of that. Matter of fact, I think some people would say, I'm sure David Mainprize would believe that what's the saying? Copying is the best version of flattery.
Yeah, imitation is the best form of flattery.
Yes,
that's same thing.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, exactly. No, blew my mind, especially hammer time. So maybe there's some other races that use that style over there. But I was blown away to see that, man. So who knows? They might actually know all about our races over here.
Yeah. Or at least we're causing big enough waves that they're looking at the obstacles, and I like to say that's a good idea.
And also Toughest Elite, they use a penalty lane. Well, I'm sorry. Well, they have penalty lanes, but they also have, usually 3 different lanes. They'll have an easy and a medium and a hard, or I want to say a medium and a hard lane. And, say if it's a medium or an easier, it's a little longer than the hard lane. So athletes have to approach their race in a completely different manner than you would here in America when, hey, we either have burpee penalties or we have a mandatory obstacle completion with a band or belt being taken, right? So I wonder if that will actually come into play and if they'll have different lanes. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, I think with it being them already establishing the bands, I don't see that happening. I think it'll be mandatory obstacle completion. I know for one of the toughest examples I've seen, for those of you who are not familiar with their race series, is the easy lane will be, a set of monkey bars that are thin, and then you have to do a low crawl and go over a wall, right? The medium lane will be, a set of monkey bars maybe that are a little bit spaced further apart or maybe a little bit thicker, and then just the low crawl. And then the fast track lane will be essentially you have to lache from bar to bar. So the bars are spread out real far, and there's no low crawl, there's no wall. So that's how, if you're good at the obstacles, you can kind of speed through. I personally still like mandatory obstacle completion. I feel like that's what makes obstacle course training and racing interesting, is because you need to be able to balance that strength and you need to be able to balance that speed. Boom, plug my own podcast. And
hashtag strength and speed.
So I think that's what I really like about it. If you just focus on running all the time and you start losing upper body strength, you might show up to a race and you can't complete one of the obstacles. And I that's what I like about it. Versus, if you spend all your time strength training, you'll probably be able to do all the obstacles, but then you might not be able to you won't be able to keep up with the runners of the field. So.
Yeah, you and me are a little biased too. We both come from a lifting background, and we love Conquer the Gauntlet, so we're a bit biased. But I'm 100% with you.
Yeah. So I think for the elite, the pro wave, I don't see the competition changing that much, right? Because I think all the big name pros from Europe are already coming over, or at least a lot of them, right? Maybe not all of them, definitely not all of them, but the really, really good ones. Jonathan Albin obviously comes over every year. I'm drawing blanks here, but all the big names come over, right?
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. And then when you're talking about those different lanes, there's some obstacles that they have in Europe that I feel like would be kind of would be a band taker for even some of the most elite athletes over here. You were mentioning the one, I think they call it, was it called Flying Monkey? It's the one where you lache from bar to bar. I want to say, wasn't that on the list of obstacles in the 2016 OCR World Championships? I believe that was on the list, but it wasn't at the race.
Could be.
At some point, and I believe that'd be because, hey, man, that's like Pegatron from Conquer the Gauntlet. That might be a little too difficult, and that's going to upset. There's not too many women that can get through Pegatron, period, right? There's about 4 or 5 that can get through Pegatron. So you imagine how many women can get through the lasheng from bar to bar. There's a lot of dudes that can't do it as well. It's more of a scarier thing. It's something more ninjas would practice. It's a very ninja-style obstacle.
Absolutely.
So that would be fascinating to see what obstacles they will have over there that will upset the pro wave. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So with like I said, I think the pro wave will be just as competitive. I don't think we'll see much necessarily change there. I think the age group waves will change significantly, right? So I think a lot of the people who maybe can podium at their age group may not be coming over all the way to North America for a race. But they, if it's like flying over a state essentially or over a country, they'll show up. So I think the age groups, I think you'll see a lot of variation in the age group, not a lot of variation in the pro compared to 2017.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
And speaking of age groups, let's talk about how they've been breaking it up. A little different than last year's. They've been breaking up. It used to be in 5-year increments on, I want to say, both days. But this year, it has been for the short course, for the 3K, it has been increments of, say, for my age group, 30 to 39. So we're talking 10-year age groups. And then in the 15K, it would be 5-year groups. So if I'm competing in my age group, when I do the 3K, I'd be competing from the 30 to 39. And then on Sunday, when I did the 15K, it was the 35 to 39 range. Now, there's a guy on Instagram, OCR United, put out some statistics, and this was super fascinating. This kind of confirmed what I already believed, is that my age group went out first because we make up the majority of the athletes. And I'm super fascinated to see if that statistic changes in next year, and to see if it's the same in the European scene, because I want to know what it is about this point in people's life that is making up the majority of it, and then how that stacks up in the results on the overall podium. I would like to see them keep it in 5-year increments. Yancey Culp made it a fantastic point when commenting on what Spartan is doing this year. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to jump a whole bunch of different topics. Just stay in there with me. Spartan is doing the same thing where they're starting in a competitive age group, but they're breaking it up in 5-year groups in the beginning, like in the teenage years and 20s, and then in 10-year increments when it's getting to, like, I believe the 30 to 39.
39 is the first 10 year.
And the 40 to the 50, and he made the point, like, hey, man, there's a big difference in my body when I was 42 now that I'm 45. And I 100% agree with him on that. And so I wish they'd keep it in 5-year increments. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the smaller increments are always, you're going to get a more comparative athlete, right? So a 42-year-old to a 45-year-old is going to be closer than a 46-year-old to a 49-year-old. But again, I think going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, at the end of the day, it's a business. So, if they're giving out prize money, if you start cutting the age groups into 5-year increments, you're going to have to probably cut the prize money in half.
That's a good point.
So, I think it depends what you want. Do you want lower probability of prize money, but a higher payout, or a higher probability of prize money and lower payout? So
that's true. It seems like the most competitive pro athletes are chasing the money more and more now. That's why, let's say today, they had the Tough Mudder toughest world champ, first ever tougher. World. I'm sorry, I said toughest. I'm an idiot. Tougher championship, right? And that was in West Virginia.
I'm not sure where it was.
It was in West Virginia, with Hunter McIntyre taking first, second place going to Ryan Woods, and third place going to it wasn't Hobie.
Hobie was on.
Yeah,
there.
It was Hobie. Hobie and that was pretty cool. And then I think Mark Batres right behind him.
Correct.
So, but you're looking at, these are guys that are Spartan Pro Team members. These are guys that are, but they're also chasing where the money, they're going where the money is. There was a $10,000 payout for first prize. It's really cool to see OCR growing and starting to be more of a payout to encourage better and more experienced athletes keep coming to the sport and legitimizing it. I feel like that's a step forward, paying athletes, especially if you want to have pro athletes. You need to pay them as such. You see how much athletes make in other sports and making more money. This needs to happen, and I applaud Tough Mudder for doing as such and paying out more. I think that's really cool. Have you noticed that? Yeah,
I mean, the more payouts, and then, like you said, more crossover. I felt like when I first got into OCR in 2014, the Spartan guys and girls you never saw them outside of a Spartan. And, with their new lineup of athletes, Nicole Miracle and Rhea Coble and, again, I'm starting to draw blanks, but
no. Hey, well, just like today, they had he is one of the best stair runners. He competes in the sport where they race up towers of nothing but stairs. Sean Stephen Wales, I believe is his name. What a phenomenal athlete. And there he is in OCR, keeping up with the big boys. He's right alongside Batrez and Victor Quesada and Hobie Call and Hunter McIntyre. He's right along there doing it. So talk about crossover. Yeah, man, that's what you need. And it's only going to get, unfortunately for you and me, it only gets more and more competitive and harder time. We dream up of keeping up with Hunter McIntyre in the first place, right? Much less all these other great athletes from other sports.
Well, so I think that's a sign. I mean, obviously, me starting to get lower placements is bad for me personally. But like I always tell people when they talk about like my long-term goals in OCR, my goal is to get better every year, but actually drop in placement because that means the sport's growing and people are getting better. So if I know like my physical performance keeps getting better, but I just keep getting pushed lower and lower in the standings, I know that the sport's growing. And while, it would be cool to be on top or, winning stuff all the time, at the end of the day, I'd rather see the sport flourish and it still be around in, 40 years and, be able to talk to people and be like, yeah, back in my day when I was doing OCR, blah, 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 versus like, hey, back when I was doing OCR and someone's like, I still don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's because we love this sport so dearly, and this is probably one of the few sports, and I haven't done anything more competitive than OCR, but that, when you cross that finish line and someone has beaten you, you give them a hug and you say, man, you kicked my butt, dude. Awesome. Way to go. You trained harder than me. Way to go. And you root on each other. Everyone's happy. Everyone's just genuinely happy for each other. And you want to see that keep going. And that goes. And of course, you want to see yourself do better and better. You want to keep pushing to get that podium, no matter what it takes. That's, hey, you want to get faster, stronger, better. It's another obstacle. It's what you're doing, and it's what you're doing daily that counts. Not what you do on Instagram or Facebook or any of that stuff. It's what you're doing in the dark, right?
Absolutely.
So you also you want to talk a little bit about OCR World Championships this year. This is the first year I wasn't able to make it, unfortunately. You were up there in Ontario in Blue Mountains in Canada. Can you tell us all a little bit about that, man? It looked like it was raining for the pro wave. And for those of you that may be out there like, I don't know why people wouldn't be able to make it through. I made it through the Platinum rig just fine. When it rains on the Platinum rig, that's a horse of another color. Can you take us through that?
Well, I think what people need to remember is there's a difference. One, when it rains, things get exponentially more difficult. All the obstacles now are wet. Your hands are sliding off. And the other thing to remember is, so the pros that were, I sat out for the 3K, a little too short for me, but I sat out and watched, and when the pros are running, right, their heart rate is through the roof, right? So not only was it raining, which makes it harder to grab the obstacles, but, if you're running like a 5-minute mile, then the amount of time you have between obstacles is significantly shorter than someone who's running a 10-minute mile, right? Which means they have less recovery in their hands and less recovery in their forearms, and their back is tired and their heart rate's higher, and their blood's having trouble getting pushed to those extremities of their body. So I think people sometimes forget that how, that it gets exponentially harder when you start running at those faster paces. But yeah, it was a messy race. The top couple of guys hit the obstacles. Of course, John Alvin and Ryan Atkins flew through it. And then the rest of the men hit it, and it was like demolition derby, right? Like people were failing, people were falling off, people were getting stuck at things. And they had, essentially it was like a platinum rig, and then shortly after there was a rope climb, and then another platinum rig, and then Skull Valley, right? So all these upper body obstacles in a row. And that doesn't even count the last couple, Skyline and Indian Mud Run floating walls. So, yeah, there was a lot of lead changes in that, for a 3K race, there was a lot of lead changes. And even when I think the third place guy crossed the line, again, because of the staggered start, he wasn't actually the third place. It was someone in like a wave back. So it's kind of interesting.
Oh, wow. Yeah. can't believe I usually memorize who placed first, second, and third in those races, and now I'm having a hard time remember. Oh, Karen Carlson was the one from Sweden. I was remembering it.
Yeah.
That's how ADHD works, people. If something just randomly pops up in your head. I believe she got third place in the women's that day, and that was an amazing. She ended up passing one of the other women. She ended up passing Nicole Miracle. She ended up passing someone else, like at the last minute
Nicole
on
won.
Indian Mud Run.
Nicole won, and then Lindsay was second.
Gotcha.
3K.
And then Karen Carlson, who's only continued to get stronger, better. She's an amazing woman. We don't hear a lot about her, but she dominates the women's group there and toughest elite in Europe. And for those of you who are going to OCR World Championships in Europe next year, you should start getting familiar with what's going on in the European OCR scene over there. You can go to YouTube and watch Toughest Elite, and you can watch their videos. Fantastic coverage and commentary. Really cool videos. They'll give you an idea who some of those women are. And you'll see women like Jonathan Albin's wife is a competitive athlete as well, and she's phenomenal. You see her and Karen Carlson and some of the other women go toe-to-toe, and those are spectacular shows of athleticism and some extremely hard obstacles, actually. They have one that's a straight-up salmon ladder. Have you seen that, Evan?
I have, yeah.
That's pretty neat. Hey, so how did Marco Bedard's Northman race? They brought one of their obstacles to you. It looked pretty difficult. Can you take us through that obstacle? Because we've seen pictures and a little bit of video, but maybe you can just kind of put it in perspective, put it in some sort of context for us.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to pronounce the name of the obstacle.
Is it French?
Yeah, it's like Le Gaff something. So we'll just call it Marco's obstacle. But basically it was several vertical poles. So it was like a vertical pole, but it was tilted. And then you grabbed onto it and kind of had to use your momentum to, pivot it at the base. So it would swing and then stop. And then you'd have to transition to another pole that was tilted. And essentially, it was 3 of them. I think his actual obstacle at the actual race has like 6. So this was a kind of like I don't say watered down version, right? But like it was modified to make it to fit inside the little festival area. Was
a steel pole just a straight steel pole? There was no grip on it, because I noticed there was a knob on the wooden stake that you made the transition to. I'd imagine while it's raining, that metal pole to be very difficult to hold on to.
Yeah, so the first pole was just a straight metal pole. Second pole was actually a wooden beam, and it had like hockey pucks on it for like grips, but not. I think there's like 3 hockey pucks, like 2 for your feet and 1 for your hand. Yeah, and then the last one was another metal pole, but this one had like a little ring at the base that you could actually step on. So I know on the 3K, they were just metal poles and the wood and then metal pole. And then for the 15K, they actually added some grip tape to it because of the rain. Yeah, the forecast for rain was pretty high. So
that's cool. At least they did that. Hey, can we call, if we can't pronounce it, can we do like we do with all other French things in America and call it freedom poles?
I like that. That's pretty good.
America. Take that, Canada.
I was listening to, I'm going to bring this up because I thought it was hysterical. On I think it was the Obstacle Order podcast, one of the guys called Canada America's hat. And I was like, I was laughing so hard in my car when I was listening to it.
That's pretty good. I love Canada, the deaf man. They're so great. They have such a good sense of humor. We're constantly teasing them, and they just laugh along right side of us. They got like the best sense of humor of all the other countries in the entire world. And then they also beat up on us. They can laugh at us all they want because we can make the jokes and they come and steal the podium from us.
Yeah.
Where are you, Hobie Call, when we need you?
Yeah, I would like to see him show up to OCR World Championships. Maybe next year. We'll see.
Yeah, I was amazed to see him at the Tougher Championship today. He ended up taking I believe he ended up taking 4th place, and he was really, he looked really chill about it and very relaxed. Like, he is really retired and was just kind of out there for fun. I thought for sure he'd be going all out trying to win that $10,000, you know?
I don't think he's retired. He keeps saying he's retired.
Yeah, nobody believes him.
Right. It's essentially his last race was supposed to be World Championships, and he hasn't even made it like a month, and he's back. He's back on the course.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody believed him in the first place. Like you said that before, Hobie. You're the best, but we don't think you're retiring anytime soon. It's just not in his blood. Yeah. It'll be cool to see how his son turns out, though. He's sitting there. He doesn't train anyone else, but he trains alongside his son. You can only imagine what kind of attention and what a phenom of an athlete his son is going to be, who's already an amazing track athlete.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm super excited to see what this future generation's coming in. You notice we learn stuff from each other as we go along. Little things make a difference, like something as simple as a cargo net. Oh, well, it took a year or two, and we saw someone, grab over on the other side of the cargo net and then flip over. Oh, that saves some time. Then you see Rose Wetzel use the band while holding the bucket, and that takes a bunch of pressure off her hands. Wow, now I haven't put the bucket down at a Spartan race. I can't wait. And then the level of speed in athletes that come in the sport are getting better and better and better. I can only imagine what it's going to be like. I joke with Victor Quesada because he's having a baby boy the same month I am, and we're trying to see who that's going to be it's going to be a rivalry, little Evan Keller versus baby Quesada. So we're going to see how great these athletes are going to be coming up and having more training, OCR specific training, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, I like to use the example of gymnastics. If you look at gymnastics videos from like 1960, and then you look at gymnastics video from today, or diving is another good one. The amount of complexity and skill it requires to do the stuff that they're doing today versus 50, 60, 70 years ago it's on a different level. So, and I think even though OCR is only a couple years old, you've already seen some progression where the obstacles get a little more technical each year, and not such a drastic change where people are having trouble keeping up, at least not at this point. But I think when you start looking at them in 10-year increments, you'll start seeing huge changes. And I think Battle Frog's rigs were a little bit ahead of their time, but I think eventually race series will eventually start going more towards that in the future. I think as we have athletes who now grow up in the sport, who experience it from a younger age, and can get a little more specialization, you'll see the overall performance level increase. And I think you see that across any sport. You look at it where they were, whether it be marathon times or Ironman times or really anything, from where they were 20, 30 years ago to where they are today. And there's always that constant improvement, and the longer the sport's around, the smaller the improvements get, but there's always the general progress. So
yeah, if you're looking for one of the young guys to watch John Penland. I believe I think he's 17 years old. May not even be 18 yet, but he's already killing it in OCR. Bracken Crocker coaches him, and he's just a phenom. Absolutely incredible. Watch out for John Penland. Call him JP. But, something else interesting talking about the OCR scene in general, Evan, is looking towards next year, especially as someone in my position that won't be able to race as much. You got to be a little choosier about your races. It's really interesting to see how the different race venues are changing their schedule a little more. You have some races, like I believe Terrain is going to not just do a race on Saturday, but now they're going to do a race on Saturday and Sunday. And then you have some other race series, like our favorite, Conquer the Gauntlet, is instead of growing a little more, they're actually pulling back to about 8 races next year and not as expanding as far, so they can concentrate a little more on family. I believe one of the brothers, Steven, is having a baby, and things like more important, right? Things that really matter in life. And so it's interesting to see these other series doing that. And then you have Spartan continuing to expand out certain areas. How are you? Oh, one thing I noticed too is so far I haven't seen the AT&T Stadium Sprint, who's everyone's favorite stadium series in Spartan. It's not on the schedule for next year so far. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. So it looks like to be quite a few changes What's your take on that?
I mean, Spartan and Tough Mudder are, the two big brands, and they're going all in. I think we saw that with Tough Mudder this year, expanding their lineup to a ridiculous level. To think that like a year ago there was the world's toughest mudder and Tough Mudder, and basically that was it. And now they have like an 8 lineup different things.
Yeah. TMX is going to have its own series.
Yeah, TMX is going to have its own series. Tougher will continue to have its own series with its championship that's announced more than a month out, which will be cooler. Toughest Mudder will be back again with more venues. I think they just added one as of now, but there might be more. World's Toughest will be back, obviously.
They're talking about taking World's Toughest to a different area next year.
Yep, it's confirmed this is the last year in Vegas. That's what they've been saying, so we'll see where it goes. Rumor mill is saying Atlanta, but I don't know how true that is. I think that's just some people's wishful thinking, so we'll see.
They did a poll, I believe, on while I was watching the live stream today, and Texas actually won. So that'd be, I'm all for taking all of the races to Texas so I can compete.
I don't think it'll be in Texas because they're doing one of the toughest in Texas already. So I doubt they're going to do, although they could. I mean, Las Vegas and I'm not sure where the California toughest West was, but I'd be surprised if they did a toughest race plus a world's toughest in the same state.
Yeah, and a new race series actually looks kind of cool. Have you had a chance to compete in? Is it called Battlegrounds? It's called Battle.
You talking one in St. Louis?
No, it's based out of the Gulf, I believe. I believe their main headquarters is they're based out of Louisiana, and it is more Conquer the Gauntlet like, where I believe it's like 4 miles and 40 obstacles, and a lot of people have great things to say about it. I think it's called Battle Race.
I'm looking it up right now. We'll cut this.
I want to say it's Battle Race, but it's really interesting, and it's attracting a lot of the other Conquer the Gauntlet athletes. People like us, man, who like a lot more upper body, more grip intensive. So that will be, and it looks like it's very well put together obstacles. Everyone has lots of great things to say about it. I always, when I look forward and try to schedule my schedule for the next year, I always try to pick one new race brand. I always want to experience a new race every single year. For me, this year, it was Bone Frog. They came to Austin, and they did it at the Speedway there, and that was super cool, man. That was really nice, and that was when Norm Coach left Spartan and went on to be a race director for Bone Frog, and that was a cool experience, but I looked at their schedule for this year, and we were just talking about the drastic changes and pulling back. It doesn't look like they have as many races, and they're not bringing it back to Texas. So that won't be an option for some.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, at the end of the day, it is a business. So, yeah, I know race companies try to go to new locations sometimes, and a lot of times you have to accept a loss on that first visit to a location, right? Because you're still getting your feet and your hands into that market. So,
not to mention,
I wasn't at.
It's probably expensive.
I was in that Bone Frog.
It's probably expensive to use that raceway. It's an F1 raceway. It's probably, they probably spent a lot of money on that, hard to turn a profit in that, as opposed to some backcountry land, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the sport changes a little bit every year, so we'll, I think you take it in stride, and I really like what you said about trying a new series out at least once a year. I think that'll help keep you well-rounded and really expose you to, what else is going on in the sport. I think if you only stick with one race brand, whether that be Spartan or Tough Mudder or, Savage or whatever, you get, you have this view of obstacle course racing that's very narrow. You don't see, the different skills it takes to do well, and you're not as well-rounded. And then, I think some of those people who only stuck to one race brand, I definitely showed up to World Championships and found out the hard way that, like, this is not, my one race brand doesn't transfer completely well to, the championship event.
Yeah. There's more to the world than Warrior Dash, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing against Warrior Dash. They're fantastic too. But so, can we leave people with some guidelines? What are kind of your guidelines for when you're structuring your race for the next year? What are kind of some things you do? Like for me, it's saying, hey, I always try to I try to focus on my strengths. One, I try a different race brand every year, and I also try to pick a championship, and I try to pick one that I can travel to, and I will also try to, outside of my state, and I also try to do something I've never done before, not just a different race brand, but say for me this year, you and me teamed up with Ryan and Chris, and we did the 24-hour team relay for terrain in Phoenix. That was my first ever 24-hour race. That was really cool. That was something new. Things like that you kind of want to aim for. That's generally how I structure my race series when I'm doing my schedule. How about yourself?
I think that's pretty good. Some pretty good input there for anyone who's looking to mimic some of that. So for me personally, I do one really stupid endurance thing every year, and I've done this year I did every 24-hour race in the world. Spartan Iceland is still a question mark, so I may not do that, but over a 365-day span, I did every 24-hour race in the world. So that I usually have one major goal. Last year it was OCR America, so the 7-day event. So I put that first. Second, I usually have some other ultra-distance obstacle course race priority in there. So typically it's World's Toughest Mudder. And now I have Toughest Mudder, so my schedule will have one ridiculous endurance thing, which I'm keeping secret for now because I haven't worked out all the details. It'll have World's Toughest Mudder on there. It'll have a bunch of Toughest Mudders. It'll have every Conquer the Gauntlet I can go to, and then I basically kind of look at to see what's in driving range and hit up a couple different brands there.
So you're going to be doing OCR World Championships 24-hour enduro in Australia next year, I'm assuming.
I'm supposed to work during that time. I have not asked for off. I'm waiting to see where World's Toughest goes to before I start requesting. I want to know the full schedule of 2018 before I start requesting time off, so I know I can prioritize. So I'll be at one of them, maybe both. We'll see.
Makes sense. Very nice.
So with that, let's wrap it up. I saw you posted on Facebook a bunch of questions, and we successfully got to 0 of them. So that's good. I'm glad you asked for input there.
Well, I must have misunderstood it, and I'm sorry, I must have miswrote it because most of the questions ended up being questions for me. Personally, I'm like, hey man, I'm just a schmuck, and you guys don't want to hear about me. Let me tell you more about OCR world, There's some good questions here, though.
I'm also getting from Facebook that it's your birthday, so happy birthday.
Oh, thanks, man. Thank you, everyone, for thinking of me. Very, very nice. Thank you for keeping me awesome. I'm blessed to have such wonderful people in my life rooting me on and helping me to continue to grow. You want to surround yourself with like-minded people that are always trying to better themselves, and you will only grow from that. And I'm blessed to have those kind of people surrounding me.
Well, I hope this was a good birthday present. So you are now besides Brenna, the co-host, you're now officially the most reoccurring guest on the show. I think this is 3 for you, right?
Yeah, I believe it's 3. You don't hear Brenna on many. You don't hear Brenna on many episodes anymore. I might be right alongside her. We might be tied. Shots fired, Brenna. Bang bang.
So I believe this is episode 31, so you're on about 10% of the episodes, so that's pretty good percentage. So
I love talking to you, man. You and me just have wonderful banter about it. I love your perspective on OCR. You're as passionate about the sport as I am, and it's always great talking to you, man.
Yeah. So before we take off, any final shout-outs you want to give?
Check me out on the Link Endurance podcast. Me and the co-host, Coach Mo. It's always fantastic. Shout out to Rollflex. Fantastic little device to help you roll. Maybe some of you are tired of trying to roll your muscles on a PVC pipe or something like that that's not getting it. Check out Rollflex. ROLFLEX. Fantastic little device. And it's portable. You can take it anywhere. Matt Campione originally turned me on to it. And that's been fantastic for me. And another man. Another shout out to your sponsor there, Merrill. I think that's fantastic. They're really going full bore on supporting OCR. The only other shoe I've seen done that is Icebug. I love them as well too, but great on Merrell for doubling up on OCR and supporting the sport.
Yeah, what I really like about Merrell, so when I first go look for a new pair of OCR shoes, I look to see if it has an insole, and if it has an insole, like it's almost no-go criteria for me, because I don't want something like extra cushiony in there that's just going to start weighing more as it gets wet. So that's why I like Icebug, because there was no insole. I used to have a pair of Under Armour shoes that I would wear for racing. Again, there was no insole on those, and Merrell's lineup has no insoles across the board. So
I think I just did to you what I do to Mo, where we're going to close the show, and I accidentally bring up another big topic, and we can end up talking about it again. I do that all the time.
Yeah, no worries. I'm going to give a quick shout out to again your podcast. If you're not subscribed to that, make sure you head over and subscribe to Link Endurance. I listen to it every week, so definitely good information coming out of there. And then finally, we're in the final lead up to World's Toughest Mudder, so make sure you're checking the leaderboard of the team event, and hopefully you'll see Team Merrell, me and Wesley Kerr up there, hopefully up front, hopefully in first. That's the plan. The plan is to win. As always, there's good competition, and it's a long race, so you never know what can happen. But, we're going to go all in, and we're going to, if we don't win, whoever does win, we're going to make them suffer. So that's the plan.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Evan. Always good hearing from you, brother. You're an amazing example of a father, an athlete, a husband, a soldier. Amazing guy, man. Thank you for Thank you for the name, Evan. I think it's a fantastic name.
All right, I'll catch you later, Miles. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Have a good night, brother.